Welcome to the Power Hour, Optometry's biggest and longest running show. I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman. Let's start off today with this question. What would you change about your practice if you had to start thinking like a great retailer? A retailer where people just want to shop. My guest today is David Friedfeld, and he's the president of ClearVision Optical. It's a 78-year-old family-owned company that ships something like 2 million frames a year to thousands of independent practices across the country. So with that in mind, David's got a pretty unique view into the window of what's happening with consumers, with fashion, with eyewear, and with independent optometry right now. And as we talked a lot about different topics, we kept coming back to this one big idea: the retail experience inside of optometry practices. I mean, we know that patients are coming to independents for eye exams, right? And far too many times, we've covered this on the show, they leave without buying anything. And we start analyzing why. And we even talk about things like the business model of Warby Parker and how they went from being online only to then physical retail to then adding eye exams, and what that did for them and what that's doing for consumers who are shopping there. And what do they understand about shopping that independent practices miss sometimes? How consumer behavior is changing, maybe, or what would actually look like to build an optical experience that makes people stop and want to shop. We get into things like price sensitivity, frame selections, David's opinion on the danger of ignoring the budget conscious patient, and one idea that I especially like: surveys. Actually asking patients who didn't buy from you why they didn't buy. David shares how ClearVision, for example, uses surveys across a massive customer base to understand what's changing in the market. But then we take that and we turn that into some very practical ideas that you can use in your own office. So there's a lot of little nuggets throughout the episode in this one, but the bigger idea and the question is kind of simple or central to this episode. If your optical is one of the most important economic engines in your practice, are you running it like that? As always, make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. And if you have any questions, feedback, or ideas for future episodes, please reach out to me directly at eugeneshatsman.com. Make sure you get me your feedback on the Eye Care Boss book as well. And now, here's my conversation with David Friedfeld on the Power Hour. David Friedfeld, welcome to the Power Hour. Maybe welcome back to the Power Hour, because I heard that you had the jacket with Gary. I think he gave out the jacket for people who were 3 or more time frequent flyers or something like that.
That is true. That is true.
Well, you are an industry legend, so it would be, it's my honor to welcome you to the show.
Thanks. I'm happy to be back. I don't know about the legend part, but I'm happy to be back. First time with you.
Okay. Well, so because it might be the first time with a few of our listeners, why don't you give everybody a little bit of context as to who you are, what you do, what your group of companies does, and that way they'll have a good sense of what your perspective is as we head into the content of the show.
Okay, great. So ClearVision Optical is a 78-year-old family-owned and operated frame distributor. We have about 10,000 customers across the country, and that gives us, probably we're into 1 out of every 2 independent practices. We're probably somewhere between 3 and 4% market share in frames sold, and we deal in licensed brands, private label brands, etc. I have a second company called Tech Print Industries, which is a software development company for 3D printing, and we also design and 3D print eyewear.
Got it. And ballpark, if you had to guess, roughly how many frames did you guys ship last year?
Yeah, I would say between 1.5 and 2 million.
Okay. So that gives you a really nice window if you got 8 to 10,000 customers and 1.5 to 2 million frames. That gives you a pretty solid window into what's going on in independent optometry today. And that's really where I wanted to focus a lot of the show. Before we get into what's happening in independent optometry, let's talk about what's happening with eyewear. Because quite frankly, you guys are a 70-year-old company. That means that you are selling different frames today than you were 78 years ago. And I'm curious, specifically over the course of the last maybe 5 to 10 years, how consumer preferences have shifted and what's really shifted in the frame business, and also how, I guess, what trends are you picking up, David, as you guys are distributing across the country?
Yeah, I would say if you look at, let's say over 10 years, I would say there's a few different uh, long-term trends. And we're gonna talk about a long-term trend being different than, let's say, something that happens in fashion. I want to let's keep it towards the consumer and less about fashion. So I'd
Okay.
say there's a few consumer trends. Number one, the consumer currently has felt some pressure. I'm speaking more recently, has felt some pressure from the economy. And that means, in many instances, when they have a managed vision care benefit, they will be using more of the zero pay patient from the managed vision care. And if they're buying a frame, they may buy down a little bit. They may buy more entry level into a category. And in addition to that, if they're purchasing eyewear, they may extend out their purchase cycle a little bit, or they may use their frame again and get new lenses.
Mm.
I would say that's a recent trend. So the last few years, mostly to do with the economy. If I look over time, though, over 10 years, I'd say there's probably two big trends, two big trends. I would say, or let's say three. Let's say three. For a consumer, I would say the consumer is more educated now than ever before. And I think in part that is coming from the industry. The industry is educating the consumer more, whether that's about myopia management, whether it's about new developments in contact lenses, whether it's about um, different technology in eyewear. I think the consumer is more educated. That's very, very important because that informs the consumer decision. I think the second thing that we've seen trending over 10 years, no question the consumer is more involved with online purchasing. Now, considering if I was an ECP listening to this, I might ask a question that revolves around volume online. So the volume online definitely picked up after COVID. So prior to COVID, it was one level. After COVID, it's another level. But the last 2 years, again, that's kind of flat. It's not, it doesn't seem to be increasing. And the big question is, if I'm an ECP, an independent ECP, should I be involved in online? My answer would be yes. If I'm a commercial, bigger location, should I be involved in online? Yes. Meaning we don't have to give online to an online provider only. And interestingly enough, while I don't have the exact figure this morning for Warby Parker, and we can verify this, you and I, but Warby Parker used to be a online seller only. And as we know, currently, they would have more than, I think, 300 retail offices. And if I'm not mistaken, the retail offices drive a bigger portion. I want to say close to maybe 65% of sales come out of retail as opposed to online. Why I bring that up is because there's a second part to online. Online not only is purchasing, but there is this shopping concept. So the idea that I can shop online, I can find a frame, I can like a frame, and then I might go around locally to buy that frame. So that's a second trend: online purchasing and online, let's say, shopping. I think the third trend that I would see is, remember now we're talking about 10 years. So certain consumers that were buying things, let's say a 40-year-old in the 1990s is now going to be in their 70s. And so that consumer, I would say, in many ways, is still tied into what they grew up with in the 1990s. But there are a lot of new consumers, they're 20 years old, 30 years old, and 40 years old today that grew up in a completely different era. And I'd say one trend that I see for that consumer is a little bit more individualism. They want the product to be more personalized or customized for them. They're less interested in bigger brands. They want more independent brands, and that allows certain customers, or excuse me, certain frame suppliers, for example, like Pro Design, right, or Moto, or companies like that, which have independent brands, to actually see nice growth in the market. It's not only about the bigger brand. And I'd say there's one more thing I would say for trend that I would say did happen over 10 years. And probably the guys at Luxottica would have a better figure for me. But I would say where Luxottica started with Ray-Ban in the early part of the 21st century, it was more focused on sunglasses. And if I'm not mistaken, Ray-Ban itself, and I would say this as it's important to understand this as a trend, has trended more into not necessarily sunglass only, but they're a big optical supplier. And I think this has impacted the consumer and the retailer in some way because it's a tremendous, tremendous brand. And that's something that I would say is almost a house brand for Luxottica today. It's not a house brand, but it's almost like that. So those are some long-term trends, I would say, over 10 years in the frame side of things.
Yeah, yeah. David, you gave us so much to kind of follow up on, and I'm trying to think about how how the conversation is going to spider web into a whole bunch of things that ultimately comes back to a central point. So let's actually, I just wanted to highlight the point you made about Warby. So Warby, and I have looked into this, and in fact, I was just writing something about this a few weeks ago, is that uh, Warby started about 15 years ago, right?
Right.
And it had this online thing. And for those of you that recall, it was kind of like it was like a in-person try-on that was mailed. It was like a little bit like the old Netflix model where you mail the CDs or I guess the DVDs, right, back
All
and
right.
forth. So I think the old program, which was the at-home try-on, where they mail you some number of frames, you mail some back, whatever, that is shutting down
Right.
officially
I
this
turned it
year.
down. Yes. Yeah.
Right. And you're absolutely right that it's got now 350 physical stores. So it started as an online company. It, after COVID, decided it was going to go double down on more and more in person consumer experiences.
Right.
And one of the big things was, and you're absolutely right that 75% roughly of revenue for Warby currently comes from physical retail and 25% comes from online, even though they're probably one of the better known online brands. Now, interestingly enough, I still think why. And part of it is that I think consumers still want to go in person to get an eye exam,
Yeah.
and they prefer, and the premise of getting an eye exam and then getting some eyewear after it is what's driving the growth at Warby. Now, there's a kind of a parallel problem that's happening with independents right now, which is that consumers get an eye exam at an independent, and at the same time, 6 out of 10 of those consumers, and I've covered this multiple times on the show, but that exam only metric that Jamie and Rosen and I defined, which is not capture rate, but exam only, is at 60%, which is one of the highest points it's ever been at since I started tracking this, is at 60% for independent optometry. And so you kind of look at this dichotomy. Warby is depending on its growth Warby is depending on the exam for its growth. And the independent, who has traditionally owned the exam and then the eyewear purchase afterwards, is still getting some of the exam or a lot of the exam, although refractions are down a little bit this year, um, but is at least approximately the same number of exams, but fewer sales after the exam.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting, I guess let's
Well,
just play with that for a second.
well, I think actually when you were talking about it, I would like to propose something to you, and that means you can tell me if you think I'm right because I never thought about it the way you just did it. I would think the way Warby built itself, and not unlike a lot of other online businesses back in 2012, 2015, 2017, there were a lot of businesses that were very much dependent online. And then they moved into physical stores, whether they moved to leasing in a space, selling to Walmart, selling to various places, or opening up like Warby. I think a lot of those companies were considered retail focused. That means in the mind of the consumer, it's a retail. And in the case of Warby, it was 100% retail. You did not get an exam from them back then. Um, So I think Warby is very much focused on retail. This is my observation. Whereas an independent eye care professional focuses on the exam.
Hmm.
And so you actually may not think primarily, I want to go get a pair of glasses from my independent. You think I want to get an exam. And that's how the reminders, that's how all the callbacks come back. Any of the interaction that brings consumers in is about the exam. It's
Hmm.
time for your yearly exam. Your
Yep. Yep.
benefits are up. It's time to get an exam.
You're totally
Whereas
right.
at Warby, I tell you, Eugene, I went to the first Warby that opened up in New York. It's been many years now, but I remember talking to Mark Ferrara about it, who was a publisher of Jobson, 2020, that whole group. And I said to him, "You've never seen anything like it. There were people in there shopping for eyewear, having 5 pairs of glasses in their hands. There's no doctor in there. They're going there with the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the mom, and the dad. They're shopping as if it was an H&M retail store on a Saturday when there's a sale. So it was just an incredible experience. And I think that's how people think. Where I go to my eye doctor, I don't get that incredible experience. And to be
Hmm.
fair, the exam only part, if you want to just step for a minute, there's a really great LinkedIn article. I don't want to be a self promoter because it's not my article, but recently I reposted something from a German optician that I'm friendly
I
with.
actually saw that. I
Yeah,
saw that.
her name is Karen Steer, and Karen talked about it as if everything looks the same in every office in Germany, then no retailer can define themselves. And I posted that, I reposted it into the United States. We got a lot of nice comments on it, and that's what pretty much everyone understands. So if you're all using the same brands, if you have no retail presence, if you don't understand online, if you don't understand that you're as an eye doctor, as an independent, or by the way, as a commercial practice, if you don't understand that you're in a retail first business, or at least retail equivalent to your clinical side, then you will only have that 60% number you're talking about. There's no excuse though for a doctor to not have 80, 90%.
Yeah. Well, so sorry. No, the we're talking 60% exam only, which
Right.
means that 60% of patients walk out the door. The best
Ah,
in
yes,
class
I
exam
apologize.
only is
Yes. Sorry.
20%.
Sorry. I
And
apologize. Yes.
but going back to your point about Warby is actually one of the things I learned was that they became profitable only they had an online business, which
Right.
you think an online business operates with great margins because they don't have physical,
Yeah.
they have warehouse, right? That's it, right? But the reality is that the online business has really high cost of acquisition, right?
Right. That's
The
exactly right.
online advertising that I have to do to get someone to buy things is way more expensive for someone who doesn't have the credibility of giving me my eye exam. So, to that same point, Warby only became profitable last year, 2025. And that was after they added eye exams at 300 locations. And so I drilled this point, and I think I agree with you, is that I think of Warby as a retail brand. And so when I get my eye exam at Warby, I'm planning to shop. So
Right.
they're already at a bit of an advantage, but they're a good retailer. And why I think of them as a retail brand is because I want to enjoy shopping there. And so, what prevents me, and there's a question for you, you've been in enough opticals,
Yeah.
what prevents me from thinking that my eye doctor is, and not my eye doctor, the brand, but
Yeah. Yeah.
my optometrist, um, is a great place to shop, is also in some capacity a retailer that I enjoy being at.
Well, it's very interesting you said that again. So I'll explain a little bit about my experiences. I will go into a lot of optical shops around the world. I will go into optical shops all across the country, and I look for that experience. So let's talk about Warby in New York City, right? So you have very expensive real estate, right? Very expensive real estate. When I walk down the street, I understand what the Warby logo looks like, right? I understand what it is. When I look in the window, it's very big windows. I can see people shopping. That's there isn't. I won't say there isn't a waiting room, but basically the medical side is behind the shopping. You see people shopping. The walls are full of frames. It looks like a retail space. So when I walk in, I'm greeted. People are in the uniform, Warby uniform, or dressed in a certain manner. I'm greeted a certain way, and I'm asked, "How can I help you?" And you're walking in either to buy eyewear or, hey, I understand you do exams. When they started doing exams, I remember it was kind of interesting. You'd sign in on a chalkboard. So you'd walk in and you'd see we have one at 1:30, we have one at 2:30. The next one is at 4 o'clock. Next one's at 5. You would actually sign your name and go, "I'll take the 2:30 slot." And the doctor was in the back. You didn't even see the doctor. So there wasn't this medical aspect to the experience. Now, if we take that to an independent, let's talk about an independent. Again, commercial. Almost anything I say works for a commercial practice as well. If you take it for an independent, they're going to decide how they want to appear to the consumer. So do I want to appear medical first? Then I have to, then for example, I could be on the 34th floor in New York City in a medical building, and you come up there and you get a medical exam. I've seen that in New York. That's not unusual. Or, outside in a rural area, you can be in a medical building along with 6 or 7 other doctors. But you understand that's a medical looking view. Okay. If you want to appear more retail, let's use like someone that I think we both know, Bill Gerber at OMG. He will help you design an incredible experience for when you walk in. But I would also say, if you don't have windows for someone to look in, how will they know what's inside your incredible experience? So I think if you want to have that same, well, let's call it Warby-esque experience for retail, you have to put yourself out as a retail player. And I think quite a few independents don't spend enough time understanding the retail experience. And to be fair to everyone, I'm a doctor, and I mean that sincerely, not negatively. I'm trained for a number of years, 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of optometry school, additional residency, and so forth and so on. I'm not trained as a retailer. I will learn how to be a retailer, but I'm not trained that way. So a part of it will be that. And in that case, I think the doctor has to combine his or her practice with a really good dispensary manager who knows retail and knows the retail experience.
Yeah, and I think this is where optometry is so unique, is because we do have to think about what it's like to be a good retailer, because that's where the revenue comes from in so many. I mean, in most practices, more than 50% of the revenue is made in the optical, and yet it's not the thing that we pay attention to first. I also think, and just because in personal experience, I've seen this multiple times, is that you walk into a practice, they've paid the consultant to design a beautiful optical, physical space. And yet, you walk in and you look in the waiting area, and there's 4 people who are sitting around playing on their phones, waiting to be seen. Some of this is about behavior change too.
Right.
Because if that was my business, I would take the chairs, I would set them on fire, I put them in the basement. There are no chairs. You walk around, you walk in, unless you're handicapped, I guess maybe there's a chair, but I'll roll it out for you. But in all reality, and I'm in a little bit of jest, but you change the experience by saying, great, while we're getting ready for you in the back, why don't you look around over here, and anything you find, I'll just hold on until you're done with your visit with the doctor. So go ahead and maybe find 2 or 3 things that you like.
So this is an incredibly important moment for you and your listenership, because I think you hit on something, and I referred to it in Warby, if you remember. When you walk in, and that's why I said I don't want to be sure there's not chairs there. But when you walk in, it is a retail experience. So if we just do it a little bit differently, and I know we're going to come to it later, but I want to put it in the back of your head. Imagine there's for lack of better, an experience where I can contact you before you come into for my exam. And we can do that a couple different ways, through text, through email, through visiting my website, etc. If there's any way I can warm you up to your retail experience. So instead of me sending you the 5 frames in advance, let's say I send you, hey, by the way, David, last time you were here, you were wearing a Marchand Nike frame. We have 6 new styles in Nike, and we also have 6 other brands that are similar. We have Carrera, we have Ray-Ban, and we'd like you to look at it before you come in. Please click off any that you like. Imagine if when you come in, you have those 6 frames waiting. I'm greeted by Eugene, the optical dispenser, and he says, Dave, I'm so glad you're here. Dr. Friedfeld will be with you in a few minutes. Here's the frames you picked out last night, or last week. Let's try them on and see how they fit, because that's really what you're saying. That's the That's the retail experience that I want. Hey, by the way, sit down here. I have a cup of coffee for you. I know that you like coffee with black sugar, black and sugar. And here's your frames. And here's a mirror. If I can do that, I'm using those 10 or 15 minutes while you're waiting with a retail experience. And
Yeah.
my chance of having a non-zero pay, right, goes up dramatically. Or
Yeah.
sorry, a non-zero an exam only. An exam
Yeah.
only. I apologize.
My exam, my non-exam only. You're right.
Right, a non-exam
Goes
only.
up
Yeah.
dramatically because
Yeah.
I'm, I'm not asking a patient. This is the worst question to ask. And again, I'm sure everyone knows this already, but you never ask, are you planning on buying glasses today? Because you shouldn't have like it. We know that it's standard of care and in the patient's best interest to buy glasses, and hopefully you believe that it's in their best interest to buy glasses from you if you're running a retail operation of any sort. And in that case, don't give them a choice. Make it easy, make it convenient. Think of the best concierge retailer you possibly see. And I love your idea, which is that I have everything ready for you. Whether you did the online prep thing or not, I still have something ready for you. I know who you are. I took a picture of your face the last time you were here. When you pick up the glasses, and just like, let's make it as simple as possible. When you pick up the glasses, let me make some excitement happen for you. Oh my God, David, you look amazing. This is great. Now, do you mind if I take a picture for our chart? Perfect. Oh, by the way, do you mind if I share that on social media with like a little, before and after? Because like the before, the plain black frames versus these awesome, eye-catching blue frames. Like this is an awesome transformation for you. Like I really love it. And do you mind if I do like a little frame makeover? Okay, cool. Like I'll do that. By the way, here's $25 gift card to give to any friend you want. Just thanks so much for being part of the family. Whatever, right? Like now we're encouraging this behavior, but now I got your picture in the chart. Now I know what you look like. And now the optician does, 5 minutes of prep work before you walk in and says, I picked out 3 frames for you. While we're getting ready for you in the back, I picked out 3 frames for you just to take a quick look at. So, and just tell me what you think so that while you're with the doctor, I'll take your feedback and I'll go get a few more ready so we can make the best use
Yeah.
of your time. That's a retail first experience.
Yeah. The other part of this, and I know that we talked about it, is capture rate and exam only. But just to be brief, there's 3 or 4 things I would advise any owner operator to understand. And again, commercial optometry is no different, except again, most commercial optometry, think about it, is mall, not all of it, but many of it's mall based. And if I'm in a mall, again, I'm in a retail environment mentality as a consumer. But I want to make sure that I have the right frame selection. So if my frame selection is off, people will not have a good retail experience. I don't want my prices too high, but nor do I want them too low. I want to have service, like we just talked about, that retail experience. I want to be served. I want to be engaged. I want to walk in and walk around and walk out like I might do at a mall. And the last part is, that doctor handoff is very important. Again, my doctor, plug a shout out for Dr. Schoenbart, I've been going for many, many years. I, by the way, do need an exam there. But the way he would do it is say, David, here's what you need for your contact lens. Here's what I'm recommending for your reading glasses. Here's what I'm going to do this. Let me walk you out to our optician. Now, he also knows I own a company, but, in other words, the handoff is very critical because I might say, I don't have time today. That's fair. But at least the doctor is not just saying, here's your exam. Have a nice day.
Yeah, no, and I really hope that any listeners of the show have heard the many ideas people have shared on how to properly structure that handoff, how to measure it, how to make sure that it happens the same way every time, and also how to make sure that it gets observed by whoever's running point, and because that is absolutely a point where money is made. But what I really love about the perception that you're offering is that, like, what if you think about your business as retail first? What would you change? And if you thought about it as retail first, I mean, and again, I challenge everyone because I know many listeners are going to say, well, I'm a really great doctor and we do a really great job of taking care of our patients, and we have all this amazing technology that looks in the various parts of the eye and we can explain it so well to the patients. And I'm not taking any of that away from anybody. What I'm saying is that if you make more money doing retail things, why not put that, as you're saying, David, why not put that at the forefront of the patient experience? And why not make the patient experience about the excitement that's associated with the retail side? Because ultimately, that's the fun, tangible thing that they get at the end of this thing. They get a great feeling about how the fact the doctor took care of them, but they also get a really, like, it's kind of like when I get a new phone, I get super excited, right? So like I get to get a new phone, I don't know, whatever, once a year, once every 2 years, whatever my carrier gives me. But I also get to get new glasses, and like let's make that an exciting retail shopping experience.
Why don't we have a little bit of fun and not reinvent optometry right now? But let's have a little bit of fun based on what you just said. I'm a great doctor, and I will do everything for that. I have the right equipment. I have the right CEs every year. I'm educated. I'm an externship. I'm doing everything right as a doctor. And now, if I said to you, "Oh, by the way, would you like to invest in a retail environment that is literally next door to your doctorship, and you can make twice as much money, and your patients will be twice as happy? Would you like to do? Oh, by the way, it doesn't cost you any money. Doesn't cost you any money. Would you like to do that?" Hopefully, the person will ask me, "Why doesn't it cost me any money?" And I can say, "Well, the patient is right in there. Your acquisition costs have gone down. They have this. They have. All you have to do is give me a little bit more space. Me meaning the other part of your, I'm not call it a partner, the other part of my business, and then you have to let us have a little retail experience. And when you're done with your doctoring, send them into the retail." It's not a really, my first experience at Nordstrom's many years ago, it was way too expensive for me, way too, as a young married guy. My mother-in-law gave me a gift certificate. I walked in there thinking, this is pretty funny, but think about it. I'm going to get a jacket or whatever I was going to get. By the time I left, I had shoes, ties, belts, in other words, all the other accessories. And I got money in addition to the gift certificate. I also spent money. So let's be fair. I'm coming for an exam. Why shouldn't I just get a pair of glasses as well? That's why I said my doctor
And
showed up.
not just one. Gary
Right,
Gerber
right,
would
right, right,
say you got to prescribe three, and they should
right.
be walking out with two.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Yep.
so, David, you mentioned this piece of the online thing. I think you were referring to the pre-shop, post-shop sort of
Right, right.
experience, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
And then you also mentioned that today the consumer is more frugal. So let's marry
Today.
that up a
Right.
little bit. Yeah, because like now I don't want to shop nearly as much because I've already decided that I'm going on the cheapest possible online place I possibly can after the exam, and I'm gonna take your prescription and I'm gonna buy it online. So work through that with me. How do I, number one,
Yeah.
is that what you're seeing when you're seeing consumers are more frugal? And then I guess why how do we keep that money still in the optical?
Right. I think that's a great one. So number one, and most of what we're going to talk about right now is publicly available. You just have to search for it, but it's publicly available. There are many online, let's call them primarily online businesses, and we're not going to qualify Warby that way, but we might qualify Zenny that way, or Glasses.com, or Glasses USA, etc. You'd be surprised. Many of those online businesses, um, they how would I explain this? Um, they actually have maybe a different consumer than we think they have. So in some cases, it may be a young person on a budget, and in other cases, it might be an older person on a budget, but it means they have a different consumer to begin with. Also, online, there are a lot of readers that get sold, a lot of sunglasses that get sold. So those are not necessarily the same kind of prescription eye that we would sell in an office. But let's come back to the office side. How does the office compete then with that um, online budget consumer? Let's talk about it that way. Um, I do believe that a lot of doctors have been uh, less aware of the options they have, which I think are at least two. There are at least two to combat a budget conscious experience online. There's at least two, there may be some more, and maybe together we can do that together. One would be I have to have a reasonable price frame and lens package that's fashionable and of good quality at a reasonable price. Now, there are a lot of consultants in the market that would say to the doctors, based on managed vision care, you should not have anything in your office that starts at anything less than 159, 189, 199, and it goes up. So if you're a consumer and you want to find, I'm talking about a cash consumer now. If you walk in there and say, gee, I've seen advertising for $95, 99 or 95 at Warby, and I've seen a certain experience at, America's Best, and I've seen an experience from Zenny, and you don't see that there's an option there for you, you will walk out. So I'd say one, every office should have a part of their dispensary that is for a cash pay patient that allows them to compete directly. Now, there are a bunch of docs that I've spoken to, and they say, David, I don't want that patient, which I think is wrong. That means they're giving up a sale because they don't understand how to make money there. There are a lot of good ways to make money there. And for example, there's some really great companies out there. Again, I'll mention them here. 8 to 80 is a great company to buy a budget frame from. Good quality, good style. Ideal Optical is a good company to buy from. Budget eyewear. So you can buy budget eyewear. And there's some great labs out there that will work with you to put together a frame and lens package. So you can,
let's talk about that for a second. Let's just talk about cost of goods. Pick Ideal, for
right.
example, as an example. Like, what would a frame and lens package cost me wholesale? Right, if I own my own optical, I'm gonna buy a complete frame and lens. Let's call it single vision, just for kicks. What's it going to cost me just for product price?
Right. There can be some good packages that are frame and lens packages that I'm aware of that would cost you anywhere between $30 and $40 for a single vision with a very good quality frame, which means if you bought it at 30-ish, let's do that, you can sell for 99 and make a 3 1/3 time markup on cash, which is great. And if you bought it at 40, it's 2.5. But remember, that patient is walking. So not only is it your margin that you have, but you actually are putting something on your top line. So if that patient walks, you're minus that money. If that patient stays, you have that money.
Yeah, and I hear you. The obvious question that's gonna, if I'm listening to this, the obvious question is, David, how do I keep that $99 thing from cannibalizing my next $370 sale?
Yeah. Well, I think again, it's as I mentioned, I think it's two different consumers. Let's be fair. There's two different consumers. One is that budget-oriented person that when they walk into my shop, remember I said there's reasons why people leave. They don't have the right exam. They don't have the right retail. They don't have the handoff right. They're not greeted right. I also mentioned price of frames, either too high or too low. If I come in as a budget consumer and you don't have budget frames, I am leaving.
But how
You
do I
never would.
know if you're a budget consumer? Because if you asked me, like if I and I'll say this jokingly, if you ask me outright when I walk into the store, like what
Okay.
am I looking for? I might say something like I'm looking for something that's not too expensive, just within budget. Now I
Okay.
might walk out like you in your Nordstrom example with uh, $1,000 worth of stuff that I didn't
Right.
really expect to buy.
Right.
But like there's the guy who says he's cheap, and then there's
Yeah.
the guy who actually like really can't afford anything more
Well, I
than a
think,
$99.
and again, that's why I think sometimes doctors will veer away from the sale. But I want to come back to managed care as well in that same experience. But let's do the cash sale one. How do I know that? I think some of it, again, is by the experience of the individual. Let's do it easy. Eugene Shatsman, you come here every year for your exam, and it's paid for by your managed vision care. Hey, Eugene, you've been here 3 years now with Dr. Friedfeld, but I noticed that when when you're done, you actually don't buy any of our eyewear. And I'm just curious why that is. Let me do a survey with you. Meaning, remember we talked about surveys. I'm going to
Mhm.
survey you. So the survey is, well, actually, honestly, I don't have any time here. Right? That's the one. Number two, actually, honestly, I looked at your frames a number of times, and I don't see anything I like. And one of my friends, recommended me to go to a different boutique or whatever. Honestly, well, I've been in here a few times, and to be honest, your frames are incredibly expensive. So how hard is it to ask why a person isn't doing that, right? Especially if we know that you're coming here every year for your exam. That's one way. Another way could be quite easy. Hey, by the way, you had an exam with Dr. Friedfeld today. Gee, you've asked for your prescription. Why is that? Two simple questions. Now, again, sometimes our doctors and sometimes our dispensary, people working in the dispensary, our opticians are a little bit averse to asking these types of questions. But to be very fair, these are not unusual questions. I would say this is more about retail experience. I'm thinking myself when you gave that example about the Nordstroms. I'm thinking again about an experience I had with Dick's. I was going hiking a few years ago, and my hiking boots were from a long time ago, and I wanted to make sure I had updated hiking boots. When you go into a Dick's today, it's really cool. They have a lot of different options, but you can buy anywhere from probably let's say a $500 hiking boot to 150. And it really, if you have a good retail experience, the person knows, hey, look, Dave Friedfeld, I don't want to spend 500. But if they say, are you going hiking in the snow? Are you going hiking in the water? Are you going hiking? Is this a year-round experience? Are you a serious hiker? Are you going to be doing rock climbing? Once you do all of that, they understand where you're going to be, and then they might say, here's the 3 shoes I recommend. That's where we need to be for that budget shopper. We need to understand what it is, why they're not buying here. And if we don't know that, we may think we may be guessing at what the reasons are. Now, there's the second part, Eugene, before you ask that next question, there's this managed vision care piece. Managed vision care, remember, I may have a benefit of, let's say, 100 and anywhere from 130 to maybe 170 or higher, and that means I'm able to get to use that benefit as well. A lot of docs don't like to do zero pay patients, right? Meaning I'm only going to take what my plan has, but we've seen that uptick again in this recent economy. So if you're willing to allow that customer to leave because you don't want to service that customer, that's a mistake. In my opinion, that's a mistake, because it's very easy to say, well, what brands can I use that will give me the biggest managed vision care reimbursement for a zero pay patient? And we do have certain companies that specialize in that. I'm not talking about, government Medicaid frames. I'm talking about low cost acquisition frames that will be under the quote unquote wholesale acquisition price of 55 to say 65. Anything over that is a quote unquote retail experience. Anything under that is a true managed vision care experience where the payor is going to be the person's not reaching in out of their pocket. So I think that there's good dispensers should also understand that on their board as well. And there are companies that specialize in that.
And you're saying rather than let 6 out of 10 patients walk out of your
Right.
office, which we know is happening right now without buying anything, at least give them something and maybe change their perception of you as too expensive or bad selection or
Right.
whatever. I love your idea of the survey. I'm going to come back to that in a moment after our break. And like to play with where that survey could possibly happen so we can give the audience some concrete choices. We'll be right back on the Power Hour. Hey, Power Hour listeners, quick question. Are you reading the book yet? Of course, I'm talking about the Eye Care Boss book, the growth manual. Thousands of copies sold in just a couple months. And if you're reading it and you want help putting it to work, go to eyecareboss.com. There's over 40 free tools that you can download, and you can also do this from the QR codes in the chapters. It's the same tools that we use with practices on a regular basis. Speaking of which, we just wrapped up a year-long study. Before the book came out, we started working with groups of practices, about 25 locations, and on average, what are the results? Refractions are up 19.4%. Revenue is up 23.9% for this group. And in a market where everything is basically flat, I would call that exceptional. So, if you want help using these concepts, you can run solo, just you and the book, and just get the tools. You can also work in a group, or you can go one on one with a coach. Your call, go to iCareBoss.com. Your dream practice is waiting for you. All right, we're back on the Power Hour, and I've got Dave Friedfeld in the studio with me, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. We were thinking about this concept of having a retail first experience, but the concept that I couldn't gloss over as you were just talking about it was this concept of surveys, which the simplest form is exactly what you said, which is train your team to ask a question. I don't care if it's the tech, and I'm just repeating back what you said, and so feel free to build on it if you got more ideas. But I don't care if it's the tech at the point of as they're doing the vision testing or the pre-testing before they get into the room, they sort of innocently ask the question, or as they're getting the patient situated in the room, they say, "Oh, hey, by the way, I noticed that last year you didn't buy your eyewear here. Do you remember why that was?" And then you just shut up and listen, right? Like it's not so uncomfortable, but it takes some training, behavior change, like we talked about before. Or at the point of, okay, I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna buy eyewear somewhere else, or I'm not gonna, or I don't have time to, whatever the point is when they're leaving, you ask the question. Now, how honest the person will be, I'm not so sure. So you kind of have to be good at asking follow-ups. My experience is that people are more honest when they can be a keyboard warrior versus telling someone to their face that their baby is ugly, which may be telling you that your optical sucks or that your staff is incompetent or whatever. So it's possible that somebody wouldn't give you an honest answer in person, but maybe before or after. What do you think? Like where else can we ingrain the process of a survey to learn what we can do to make the optical better?
Yeah. So I think that's a I'm not going to disagree with anything you said. Let's do that. I'm not going to disagree with anything you said. Let's also be sincere about why we want to survey. All right. So I'm going to talk a little tiny bit about ClearVision, and then I'm going to talk a lot about the retailer. My dad was famous for going to his best customers and basically saying, "What is the competition doing that I'm not doing? What's going on in your practice that I need to know something?" And I actually spoke to Kelly Bainey, who's Value Optical down in Trinidad. I spoke to him last week, and we were talking together, and he goes, "You remind me of your dad from 35 years ago," because I was doing the same thing, asking certain questions. So the idea of asking questions improves your experience yourself. All right. Now let's take it back to retail. So can I send out let's do a few different ways. We can do it a few different ways. Can I ask you, "Hey, Eugene, you just had a great experience here with Dr. Friedfeld. Yes. Would you mind doing a Google post? Something like that.
Yeah, people ask that all the time. That's
right.
That's
But I'm saying, I can do that. Now, again, I may not, like you're saying, I may or may not getting super compliance. I may not get super honesty, but let's say that's one way. Can I do a written survey once a year to all of my 20,000 patients and say, "By the way, Dr. Shatsman is looking for feedback on your experience last year with us. One, were you treated properly coming in? Two, did you buy your eyewear with us? Three, did you find that our technology was up to date? Four, something along those lines." And it's totally anonymous, let's say. Can I send out a monthly newsletter and do the same type of experience? Can I encourage you to comment on my website? Yes. Can I do that? Like you said, face to face, can I do that? And, Eugene, you and I are getting friendlier in the last little bit of time, but I know that you will tell me face to face what you think in a diplomatic way. I've even noticed how you do it today on your show, how diplomatic you are. But, last week I went to a restaurant. I never was there. And I had this unbelievably great experience. And I wanted to speak to somebody and tell them that. And the woman was like flabbergasted that I took the time to say to her, I've never been here before, but I am going to come back, etc. Don't we want that experience? By the way, my eye doctor, I drive about 35 minutes to get there. What does that say about me and my eye doctor? Because I think the average eye doctor, if I remember correctly, people like to stay within 7 miles of the eye doctor.
Mhm.
My guy's like 17 miles away. I started using him. I moved. I never changed. I think he's highly competent. He's a great guy with contact lenses. He's really good about keeping me honest about all the other things I should do for my eye health. You understand why I'm saying this. I'm not going there for the retail experience, although he's a very good retailer, but I am going for the doctor. Why shouldn't he survey me? And why should he understand why I'm coming back, why I'm driving 17 miles? These
Well,
are
and
all,
and
yeah.
I'll give you one more, David, because I just it occurred to me as you were talking that, and I know that we do this for some of our clients, and I'm wondering maybe we should do this for more of them. Is during times of economic uncertainty, people are
Yeah.
looking for value. One of the things that you can potentially do is discount your whole inventory and say everything's 20% off or whatever, which is a terrible idea. You and I would probably agree completely. Or start offering, oh hey, 20% off, because I'm trying to, I'm trying to keep up or not be perceived as super expensive. Another way to do it, which is, if you're trying to give someone a price break but ensure that they come, is send people a survey. Take your patients who haven't been in 13 months to 60 months since last exam, send them a survey and say, by taking this survey, I'm going to give you $25 to shop in my optical, gift card gratis, but just want your opinion. And they haven't been there for 13 to 60 months anyway, so they're less likely to come back already, right? They missed their eye exam. So this is your shot to reactivate patients, get real feedback, and also get people in the door and can ensure that they're not going to be an exam only because they have a $25 gift card to shop in your optical, which is what motivated them to walk in the door. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like a 3-in-1 idea based off of what you just said.
You mentioned, by the way, I agree, but a very good idea. Very good idea. Because we're also what happens, it's very interesting. People will miss a cycle with an OD, and the OD will feel that they moved. They never actually called that person, or something happened, or whatever. And the person shows up 4 years later, and they go, "I'm here to see Dr. Shatsman." And they go, "You haven't been here in 4 years." They go, "Yeah," and then they'll explain. I went to, and then they'll name it, or I shopped at, and they'll name it, and I didn't have a good experience. And then you have them
Mm-hmm.
back. So I think we should mine. I'm going along with you. We should mine our data, but I want to challenge a little bit of what you said before about the keyboard warrior versus the face-to-face experience. I'm having an interesting experience at my own company. For the last 3 or 4 months, I've been asked to participate with a group of salespeople that I normally don't participate with, meaning I'm taking on a slightly different role. And what's great about it, I told everyone, hey, listen, I'm not your sales manager, and I'm not here to get anyone in trouble, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just need to learn from you guys, and let's be honest. And I promise you, Eugene, it's the most incredible experience, because once you let somebody speak safely, hey, I didn't do this last week, Dave, and I know you want me to do it, is what I'm looking for. Because then I can say, gee, why didn't you do it? Right? In other words, if you create a safe space for the survey, if you will, people will give you more information. So isn't it easier for the dispenser, maybe not the doctor, because that may be a little bit too personal in the medical side, but wouldn't it be easy for the dispenser, the office manager who knows you and says, Eugene, we noticed that you weren't here last year, or you didn't buy your eyewear here. By the way, we'll say it like this. By the way, I know sometimes people have said that our selection is not that good, or maybe our prices are a little bit high. We just do those two. Could it be that that's why you weren't here last year, or was it something else? Then they can say, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you what happened. I kept my own glasses. I've been meaning to get a pair of glasses for a year. I didn't buy from anyone. I got the exam. I didn't have enough time and I left. Wouldn't that be great information?
You're
So
totally right.
this, yeah, but I'm saying if we allow someone to be safe instead of saying, "Hey, why didn't you come here last year?" If we say it like that, the person might say, "Well, I didn't have enough time," and then that's the end of it. But if we give them a reason or two and allow them to be safe,
Yeah.
that's the end.
It's almost like a little bit of a self-deprecating mechanism by which you're asking this, which then allows them to say,
Sure.
"Well, no, 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 your selection's actually really good,
Right.
but it's just that you're too expensive." Or no, no, it's just that you guys are always starting these appointments like 20 minutes late, so I never have time to shop in my lunch break.
Exactly.
Yeah, fascinating. So I know you guys do surveys of your customers, right?
Yes.
What and so this is kind of a interesting one for me because I think you're one of the only companies that I know that runs what is it, weekly, bi-weekly survey?
Yeah. So we have I'll tell you how this started. I actually, to be fair, I don't remember, but it probably started with my dad, like 35 years ago. Um, we did two things. We do two things now regularly, but the way it started was we did a survey once every 2 months to all of our customers in writing when we wanted to get information about the market. So it could be about anything. I'll give some very good examples though. So we're going to survey the kids market, and we want to understand myopia management. We want to understand frames. We want to understand frame and lens packages. So we want to understand a lot of things about the kids market. Why we do it is so that we can educate our salespeople, number one. Number two, make changes in our business, say our product offering, number two. And then number three, what we do with that information is we create something that we call Pulse, Pulse, or we create white papers that are available and we give them back to the customers. So not only the people that took the survey, but we give it back to the community generally. So that's where it started. That's number one. What we started to do probably about 3 or 4 years ago, when we want to be more topical, we take two different questions a month, and our salespeople actually ask that question face to face. So, for example, the question might be something like this: um, Do you, in the last 3 or 4 months, do you find your patients being a little more sensitive to price in your dispensary? That would be the question. Very simple. Yes, no. Now, the sales reps go out and they'll see usually, let's say, 6 people a day, 30 a week. If they're doing everything right, we'll actually have 30 answers from that one. If everyone does that, and to be fair, Eugene, not everyone does this. So I want to be clear. Not every survey is answered. Not every salesperson is at that level. But if we do that and we have 70 salespeople, we're going to hear from 2,000 people this week and 2,000 next week across the entire country. So we'll have 4,000 people answering a question, yes or no. Yes, my customers are more sensitive. Recently, we heard from our salespeople that they felt that, if I remember correctly, they felt that a lot of the business in the kids world was going to commercial optometry or online. So we asked a simple question: Do you stock eyewear for children in your office? Yes, no. And we did find that probably, I think it was 10%. I think it was 10% was the number. They don't even stock anything close to what would be a kid selection. And kids for us is under 18. So in other words, if we do that, we also get to understand what the market looks like. So we do two things. Remember, good for our company to help develop product, good for our salespeople to develop training, and good for the community to give back that information to the community. And if anybody wants to see it, we usually publish it. I don't know if it's in Facebook, but it certainly is in direct marketing to our customers, direct newsletter format, and it's also on LinkedIn, and it's under Pulse, Pulse. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's where you're getting some of that information about more cost sensitive
Right.
consumers and that kind of thing. Have you asked any questions about technology at all lately, Dave?
Technology, to be
AI,
honest,
technology,
yeah,
anything?
yeah, yeah. To be honest, I'm not sure that we have, but a typical question might be about, let's say, the use of AI in your office, by example, or we might ask a question about, do you have an online presence, meaning omni-channel, like we were talking about? Do you sell online? So we would ask those types of questions. But the great thing is, Eugene, I'm giving you an offer right now. If you'd like us to survey anytime in September, October, something you'd like, you tell me, Dave, here's the question, and we'll go get 500 or 700 answers for you in 2 weeks by our team going out and asking that question. We'll give it back to you. We'll publish to the community because I did that last week for another guy in the contact lens business. So
Can I
I'm
report
happy.
back on the
Yes.
power hour? Give you credit?
We'll give credit to the Power Hour. We don't. We don't.
No, no, no. I'm saying okay, I'll give you credit. I'll report your findings on the power hour,
Okay,
and I'll give you
that's
credit.
fair. That's fair. But you have to give me the question. I'm saying it's a Eugene question.
Of course, I'll give you a question. I have 12 questions. I could give you. I could give you in the next 10 minutes. I just like I want to make sure they're good enough questions that they're worthy of.
Okay.
They're that the way they're asked. This is the part
Let's.
about surveys. So you hit the nail on the head when you were saying, if I say, Dave, you didn't buy from me last year. What's with that?
Yeah.
That's one way to ask that question, and you'll probably feel a little, like you're kind of supposed to say something that is like a little defensive and whatever. And there's a certain personality that might answer that question honestly, but most people won't. But if
Yeah.
I disarm you a little bit beforehand, and and I do, and I ask it in a way that where you can be open and honest with me, that's a different question. So I just want to make sure that the way I phrase it
Yeah. Yeah.
is right for
I,
for the
I,
audience.
I will say one thing to you because again I don't know who your audience is exactly. I mean we've talked about who your audience might be. I'm sure there's a lot of professionals, but I'm sure there's industry execs and salespeople, etc. We usually do a survey once a year that is more about customer service, like our customer service. And I don't want to in any way besmirch the role of a sales professional. I don't want to besmirch anyone. But what we do find is when people stop doing business with us, more often than not, it's not about we ship them wrong, our prices are too high, our frame broke. It is more about the salesperson didn't perform a service, they weren't responsive, they didn't show up, they were rude to someone in my office. And that's really interesting because, again, think about it. If I have a great doctor experience, but the person at the front desk is rude to me, when I leave, I may say to myself, I'm never coming back here. And so part of what we need to do, again, is understand that the doctor can be a great technician and great medical and great everything. But if the rest of my experience in the office is not good, I also am surprised. I'll give you something that's personal. I'm surprised that a lot of doctors, and I have an eye doctor, I have a skin doctor, I have an internist, I have a dentist, I have a periodontist. In other words, we all have doctors. I'm very surprised that a lot of doctors don't engage with me at all. That means they don't try to get me back in their office. And if I miss an appointment, maybe they call once or, in other words, I'm saying they're not marketing to me to
Right.
keep me in their practice. And unfortunately, that means I also miss, I may go a year or two without going to a doctor. And they go, David, what are you doing back here? I go, oh, my wife told me to come back, but they didn't tell me to come back.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think medicine in general, and this is where eye care is so unique, is that I think dentists are the best marketers because your dentist makes sure that you have a 6 month checkup before you walk out the door, and somehow the consumer has been so well convinced that they must show up to that appointment. And there's a variety of topics we could go into on that front, but we probably won't today because we're right about out of time. But on the other side, when I think about the doctor who works for one of the largest healthcare companies in the world, the Cleveland Clinic, who happens to be my doctor, like they don't care whether I show up for my physical this year or not, and they don't, or I guess they don't seem to care. Maybe somebody the bean counters care, but the Cleveland Clinic doesn't seem to mind at all that I missed it in the last
By
year.
the way, Eugene, that you hit the nail on the head. That there's no question about that, and that's you and I have talked about that. I have a patient base as an OD that is this big, right? But if I only market to a quarter of it, then I am not marketing to the other 75%. I'm leaving. Let's, we can look at two ways. I could say I'm leaving money on the table, or I might be able to say I'm not providing the right service to my patients. They, if David needs to be here every so often because he has an IOL, he had an injury to his eye, he had this, he had that. He has dry eye the last time he was here, and that was 10 years ago. Why can't I market to those people? And I think this is, without pushing, again, on any one part of the market and encouraging people to do business with others, let's be fair. There are some great marketing companies out there that would help an eye doctor do some of this at a very, very reasonable price. And I think that's important that people understand that.
Yeah. Well, David, as we wrap up today, I think our show has turned into a discussion about having a retail first operation, realizing that if you make your money in that spot, then maybe you should pay attention to it. Um, One last tip from your perspective. Is there anything in particular that you would want to make sure that listeners definitely take away and start doing as soon as possible in their office so that they can transition more closely or more closely aligned with this principle of being retail first?
Okay. So I want to be clear. I'm okay with the concept of retail first for both of us, you and I, but I don't want a doctor to hear that we're diminishing that part of their world. So
Correct.
I'm going to,
Well, we've
right,
talked about that. I'm not
right,
saying at all that you can't have an amazing medical practice. I'm just
right.
saying that the mindset shift of I make a lot of money in retail, so I might actually want to think of my practice retail first, just as a thought exercise, so that
Good.
thing can function
Yeah.
better in my business.
Right. So I'll give you one, and I want to give what's the right word, a nod to a former mentor of mine, Dr. Gail Mard in Indiana. He has been retired for quite some time. He was a professor at one of the colleges. He had a great retail practice, and I learned a lot from him. Now, interestingly enough, he was a great doctor, but if you walked into his world, it was a retail world. And here would be my advice. You're a CEO of your practice. You are an owner operator. Go into your practice and see, as a doctor, and go in, or an owner operator, go into your practice and see what the experience is. Because when we say retail first, I think you and I probably have to come up with a better word, because when we think retail, we think mall. We shouldn't be thinking that. We should be thinking customer experience. So the customer experience includes retail and includes medical. It includes how we're greeted and how we're followed up. It's not necessarily retail, but it's the experience. In Dr. Gailmar's practice, here's the advice. Everything was measured, everything. He had an unbelievable selection of frames, unbelievable, but he didn't overstock. He understood exactly how many he sold and how many should be on the board. He built deep on that retail. So when you walked in, you didn't just see 3 Donna Karan and 3 Kate Spade and 3 Coach. You saw a full experience, 24 Coach, 24 Donna Karan, 24 otherwise. He didn't repeat anything on the board. So you didn't see the same brown men's frame in round 14 times at 14 prices. If he wanted to show you Oliver Peoples, he showed you that. If he wanted to show you Ray-Ban, it was a different experience. So I'd say think about your retail. Then I would say inspect what you expect. So a lot of CEO doctor owners don't inspect anything. They, again, I'm speaking broadly, not about any one particular doctor. But if you're not inspecting, what anything can happen. So I want to inspect. I want to set goals for myself. I want to spend some time training my staff to show what the experience should be for anyone here. I want to hold people accountable to that experience. Hey, at Dr. Shatsman, this is how we do it. I understand at Dr. Friedfeld, you may have done it differently, but at Dr. Shatsman, this is how we do it. So I think that's what I would say. And again, if we do that, if we create the experience, we train our people to have that experience, we inspect them for that experience, and we build out our medical side and our retail side, our dispensary side to incorporate that experience, we should have a very, very successful practice.
That's great, David. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Power Hour. I'll send you my version of the jacket after I hear some feedback from the. I'm going to survey my listeners and make sure that they are getting what they want out of this episode. And so, if you are listening, this is my plea to you to make sure that you provide some feedback to us. David, thank you so much for being on the Power Hour. Really appreciate you sharing some time with us today.
All right, thanks a lot. Look forward to the next time.